Yeah, peace everybody. I'm trying to do this video. There was this ancient general from China by the name of Sun Tzu. He wrote the famous book, The Art of War. Also, he wrote the book, The Art of Peace. It has 13 chapters in it. It's very simple, very easy read. And the basis of the book is how to be successful in war without exhausting yourself, without unnecessary waste of resources. You know, and he say it's not necessary to be 100%. It's not necessary to have 100 victories 100 times. But if you could get your enemy too scared to fight you, that's the best thing to do, to avoid the fight. You know, if you can, because the idea is to keep all of your resources and also take advantage of the enemy's resources and weaknesses. But one of his most famous quotes of Sun Tzu was to know your enemy and to know yourself, right? So a lot of people try to look at this quote and try to say, okay, it's a very philosophical, psychological meaning, to go deep into the mind of the enemy, to know the enemy's weaknesses and strengths and desires, right? But I see it very simple. Know who your enemies are. Identify the enemy. Because once you identify the enemy, everything is easy. A lot of times the enemy is very elusive and deceptive. You don't even know it's the enemy until the last day. Like the book Othello, written by William Shakespeare, is really the tragedy of Othello, the Moor from Spain, right? And Othello's worst enemy was his best friend, Iago. And Othello didn't even know that Iago was his enemy until the last scene of the movie, or the book. You can read the book and the movie. And the movie was played by Lawrence Fishburne. So Othello, if he would have known Iago was the enemy earlier, his life would have been saved. He wouldn't have killed his wife, Desdemona. He wouldn't have been, I think Othello was imprisoned for killing her. And all of his territory and land was seized by the king. But if Othello would have known sooner who his enemy was, he would have been a lot better off. And this is the reason black people always fail, because they don't see simple logic in things. Like the most basic logic is, it is exactly what it is. You have computations, you have variables, you have equality. This equals that. It has to be balanced out. With black people, they want to see something else. They want to look at something imaginary, some illusionary thing, and this comes from probably oppression. When the so-called Caucasians had domination over blacks during slavery and also during Jim Crow, even to this day, in some aspects of the country, they were scared to tell the truth. They ask you, what color is the sky? The slave would say, or the black person say, the sky is blue. Say, no, it's not. So they were scared to look at logic, and they would just believe the sky was not blue because they was afraid of the consequences of that. And that's an analogy. But the so-called black people had all the evidence in the world to know Joe Biden was exactly who he was. You have no instances in his entire career of him being friends with blacks, shaking hands with blacks, having anything good to say about blacks in 50 years. Also, all of the policies he ever passed about blacks was to imprison them and to disenfranchise them and to disempower them. Yet, this simple computation, 2 + 2 = 4, that somehow the blacks said 2 + 2 = 10. Joe Biden is going to do this for me. He's going to do that for me. Trump is the enemy because he's a racist, because his personality, he's not presidential. You know, therefore we got to get Biden in there. They could have did a Google search of Joe Biden calling black people animals and jungle monkeys and all types of madness, and evil that he has done. And he was the vice president under the Barack Obama, in which nothing happened for black people. Yet they couldn't see the enemy. Now, in order for the enemy to be successful against you, they could either take you on head first, head up in a fair fight, like they used to do in the Gladiator, the ancient Roman days, even in the ancient America when they on the battlefield and they had different colors representing different enemies. So you knew exactly who the enemy was. You had traitors and spies, but for the most part, the enemy was straightforward. Then you had, but they could either do that or they could deceive you and make you believe they're your friend, just like how Cortez was sent here by Spain. He was a conquistador, but he came to the Aztecs as friends in Mexico. And the Aztecs actually thought Cortez was a friend, and he turned one group against the other and had them fight and kill each other. And when the victorious group won, the conquistadors just wiped them out because they was weakened from fighting. They said, oh, you didn't know that was the enemy. See, in order for the enemy to stab you, they got to be close to you. In order for you to get backdoored, in order for you to get betrayed, they got to be inside the house to open up that back door, to stab you back, and stab you, to do you in. And this is what the so-called Joe Biden did. You ain't black if you don't vote for me. Yet you have no agenda, no policies, no executive orders. You have nothing. You know, you're bringing in the cavalry. Literally, the person you put in office is bringing in the cavalry against you. A whole 20-some million people coming in at you. And you sitting back looking stupid. See, I'm happy this happened. Because the enemy has to reveal himself. Like the Godfather 2. Fredo was the enemy of Michael Corleone. And Fredo didn't reveal itself until they was in Brazil. No, they was in Cuba. And Fredo was bragging about him and what's his name? Whatever his name was, one of the enemies of Michael Corleone. Roth, Hyman Roth. But Fredo told Michael he never met him. He said, you the enemy. And once he revealed who the enemy was, everything else was easy. He found out who the mole was, who the enemy was. See, y'all didn't know Biden was the enemy. But you knew he was the enemy because you could do a simple calculation. You know, it is exactly what it is. If something is failing, you could look at it and say it's not failing. Turn back a day later, it's dropped even more. It's dropping. It's over. You could have handled it earlier and saved something. You could have recovered something. But because of your imagination, because of your belief, see, this is subjective thinking. You think objectively. You don't think logically. You don't think critically. You think with your feelings and your imagination. You hope. I'm talking about hope, change. But you're not thinking of things that's tangible and possible. You just hope things happen. A person didn't tell you, if a person don't give you a promise, a simple promise, before they get elected, and telling you, wait till I get elected, what leverage do you have for them to give you a promise? Like, he could have easily promised you something. You say, you ain't black. Slapping you down. Yeah, your imagination, all these so-called blacks who done told you to vote for Biden, who did Black Lives Matter and raised millions of dollars for his campaign, they did everything they could to get this guy in without even a promise. No day one, nothing. Nothing. You telling me this is not your enemy? Who's going to bring in your adversaries to take your jobs, to take your money, to take your resources, to take your opportunities, to take your education, to take your communities, to bringing in a whole foreign nationals to wipe you out. This is not treason. This is not, what you call this? Sedition. Working against your own so-called countrymen, bringing in foreign nationals. executive orders for illegals. Not even the people who raise millions of dollars to finance this guy, to steal the election, to go in there with the ballots, pulling ballots on the tables. But you got to know exactly who the enemy is. And this is great because the enemy has been revealed. Now the so-called blacks are angry that nothing was said about them in 2 days. You should be happy that nothing was said about you in 2 days, because now you have a clear sight of the enemy. The enemy is there. The enemy feels that he doesn't need you anymore. He's nearly 100 years old, so he got what he needs, and he hates you, so he's bucking you right now. Now you got to do something now to really, there's really nothing you can do other than recalibrate your thinking, because this guy has total power really to wipe you out. You reinstitute slavery and command the military to put you in chains if he wanted to, with his racist Congress. Throw you in a concentration camp. But yeah, that's all I want to talk about. You got to know exactly who the enemy is, and that's the easiest way to be successful, knowing exactly who your adversaries are. You don't want to be thinking you don't have adversaries and they working to destroy you. Oh my God. By the time you figure out you got enemies, it's too late.